All right, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to do this. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's been a while since we've done this, and so please bear with me, right? If you haven't gotten a shirt yet, please get a shirt later. Bathrooms are over there. There's breakfast and food will be over there. We'll have snacks later, and hopefully we'll keep everybody entertained. Happy hour is either going to be right here or it's going to be right out there. It depends where they set it up. And he's got some good stuff Mark recommended. So it's all Mark's fault. Thank you. So if folks don't know me, I'm Andy. I created Arkimeet many years ago. It was called Moloch. A lot of the ideas came from Owen, who's right over there. Rich, who's I lost. Where's Rich? There's Rich. And William, who is on the phone.
I'm Elise. I'm a software engineer and a UI UX expert. I rewrote the Arkime UI, 2016? I've rewritten it twice, actually, in 2 different frameworks. And yeah, I've transitioned from UI stuff to full stack. So full stack Arkime, except for I won't touch the parsers. That's Andy. I don't do C, unfortunately.
C's amazing. We have Chris over there. Say hi, Chris. Chris will be doing a talk later and doing a more formal introduction later, but he's our cloud person who knows a lot about cloud, especially AWS. And Toby, unfortunately, is sick, so was not able to show up today, but he is a software intern. He interned for Yahoo last summer and worked on context and a bunch of other stuff. And then he's just started again this week, right?
Yes, he started again yesterday.
So we're excited to have him work on Arkime again and doing cool things. There's a really cool article about him, and I'm sure he loves that I bring this up, about him and his dad, about how they created context together, and because his dad is William, who is the person who's going to randomly say things during this conversation unless Owen mutes him. Here's the agenda. It's going to be agenda flexible because we started a little bit late. And we have a bunch of breaks and stuff that we can, absorb if we need to, and the fire talks. Yeah. So Taylor has offered to be, what do they call in Survivor when they snuff you out? Like you're kicked off the island? Oh, okay. Right. So, but do think if you have something to talk about or share during the fire talks, we would love to hear you. You don't have to have slides. You don't have to have anything. Just come up here and talk. And I have already one volunteer, or I volunteered him. And other people love to hear what you're doing with Arkimeet. So we're going to try something new this year. We're going to use Slido for some interactive coolness. I've been told by my children that every good presentation has Slido. Rich knows what I'm talking about. We couldn't use TikTok, unfortunately. That would be much cooler, but we're going to use Slido. So please log in. We're going to have a quiz and a cool prize. I don't even know where the prize, there's the prize. I'm not going to tell you what the prize is, but I see it. It's going to be amazing. There's only 5 questions. Shh. So please, yes. We should give Seth a present just for joining. He was the first joiner. I didn't know. Or you can type in the number. There's only 5 questions, so you can do this. How many seconds are we going to give people?
I'm giving you 1 minute. I'm on the clock.
Okay. Come on. And then we're going to also use Slido for some real feedback later. So we have some ranking that we want people to help us rank features and other things. So it's not just for silliness. Yes, Matt.
My hotspot is making me sad. Is there Wi-Fi?
There is Wi-Fi. It is guest. And then the password, capital B, broken, capital W, wires, at 2019.
All one word.
Do you want to just pop the slide up or?
Okay.
Put it in the chat. Thank you. Well, these people aren't on the chat, but yes. Is that the chicken egg thing? If it's in the chat? Yes, it is. Dan?
Well, if you're on your Slack public.
All right, there's been 1 minute.
It just got on the internet,
Okay, I'll give
Okay.
you,
We're doing it
15
based
more
on you,
seconds.
Matt. You are going to be the deciding factor.
as it should be. Okay, I'm in.
My kids say that they get in instantly. I mean, I don't know what's going on here.
We're not technically staff.
Oh, is that the problem? Okay. Yeah.
Install PC support or desktop.
Yes. PC load letter. Okay. 30 seconds. If you were paying attention to the slides before, this answer is obvious. Oh, okay. I guess no one was paying attention. It's supposed to be an icebreaker. I think we're actually making people sad. It's a sad breaker.
sad burger.
Yes. Whoa, okay, 60% of people were paying attention. Good job. Nice. You guessed it?
I guessed it.
Okay, awesome.
Who knows the full name of my cat?
I was going to say, what's up with the full name of that cat?
It's an awesome name. You got to go watch the anime Outlaw Star. You'll know.
Lost Star.
Mm-hmm.
So
What's that one?
You don't know Aisha Clan? She's the cat lady. Oh, come on, guys.
Since I lost Star.
Oh. I mean, yeah, that was like the 90s, right?
I'll look it up again.
You're going to have to watch it again. I think it was 90s.
okay, so let's get started for real. Now that we wore you down, let's talk about the new name. Like everybody's wondering, why are we no longer at Molocon and we're now at Arkimeet? It's an excellent question. Basically, it seemed like the right thing to do. We were causing some conflict. People were upset. We wanted to have an approachable name, inclusive, and all the cool kids were changing their names of their products at the same time, so just join them. We actually reached out to Zeke and some of the other folks, Wireshark, and I talked to the folks there, thanks to some introductions from Phil and other people. And you know, the basic premise was, would you rather spend time fighting about the name or build an awesome product? And we were like, let's just build an awesome product. So that's why we ended up with the new name. And then the logo, we actually worked with some designers, and I think it's pretty cool, actually. I think it turned out great. And where did the name come from? Well, there's this movie called Sword of the Stone.
Mhm.
Sword in the Stone. I always get it backwards. And we wanted to have an owl-themed name. And in that, Merlin's owl is named Archimedes. And Archimedes is kind of smart, sarcastic, grouchy, all qualities that I love. And I was like, this is perfect. But Archimedes is too common a name. You can't Google it and get directly to our thing. So let's shorten it and change the spelling a little bit. And so it's Arkime. It's kind of Archimedes without the D's. You can pronounce it however you want, but there is a GIF way to pronounce it, which is Arkime.
GIF.
And if you pronounce it the wrong way, that's your problem. But the way you're supposed to pronounce it is exactly.
I don't like peanut butter.
Okay. One of the most common questions we're getting is, what's the deal with OpenSearch and Elasticsearch and Arkime? We're going to continue to support both as long as possible. We know that they're going to diverge at some point. And when that happens, maybe we will have to make a tough decision. But for as long as we can, we are going to support both. And to kind of prove that, we are already doing that with some of the features, such as ILM versus ISM. You know, Elasticsearch has ILM, OpenSearch has ISM. They're very similar in how they work. You actually don't have to use either, because Arkime has its own way to delete indices also. But you know, we're just proving that we're going to support both. I will usually say OpenSearch during this talk. Other people might say Elasticsearch. We mean both. There's very few cases when we really mean just one of them. So you know, don't feel like we're saying one over the other. And with Elasticsearch, Yahoo, who is pretty much the biggest sponsor of Arkime, has petabyte scale Elasticsearch clusters. So it's not going to be, we're not going to stop supporting it anytime soon. unless there's a secret for now. Okay, fine. There's the Yahoo folks are right there, but at least for now, they're not. We continue to run tests against both of them. Okay. Wow, pretty good, but not as good as last time.
Nice.
It's 43 months. Can you believe? It's been crazy, right? Everybody knows that.
When you give a more specific option.
And it's also B, which is like the most common answer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we've been really busy. It's hard to believe our last one was October 1st, 2019 in, where was it? San Jose?
Yes.
In the
Sunnyvale.
Sunnyvale, in the Yahoo campus. And we had a great happy hour afterwards for those who came. We went through some good stuff. Back then, we were on version 201, and it's hard to believe we're already on version 431. I mean, we've done a lot of work on it, and you can just see the difference in the commits. There's been a lot of things going on. You can always look at the changelog. A lot of people don't know this, but the changelog is committed into Git. You can always go in there, see what we're working on. The top entry will be what is going into the next release, and the date will always say XX for when the release is, because we don't actually predict when our releases is that much. But yeah, please look at the changelog. So now I'm going to start going into some of the major changes, and I'm going to be doing mostly text versions of the major changes. Elise is going to do a cool video or a live demo, and that will be more interesting, but I'm doing the boring stuff first. Lots of people have asked about documentation. Can we have better documentation? And I feel that we finally do. If you haven't gotten a chance to look at our API documentation now, I think it's great. It lives in our GitHub website. It's automatically documented or automatically built from the code. So we just run a little program. It reads in the code and it generates the documentation. It's using a standard to do this. It's easy to build and update. And I feel we're doing a lot better job than we were last time, which was not the best. So I'm excited. Which leads us to our website. How many of you knew that the Arkime.com website also just lives in GitHub? Raise your hand. Did you know that? Okay, so most of you knew that, but anybody can submit changes to the Arkimeet.com website through the PR process. And we really want people to do that. We want people to help us make the web page better. So don't feel like it's just us having to do that. We want you to participate. So some of the cool things we've done in the last couple of years is we've improved the download page. We now have 9 different OSs we're supporting, which is kind of crazy, but at least made it so that at least it's usable now. We have galleries of rules and Wise configuration that you can go and download and just copy and paste into Wise or your config files. And you can share your rules and Wise configs that you want other people to look at. So yeah, please participate. We would love it. Did I hit the right button?
You have to click it again to start it. How many releases have we done? Oh, very split.
Wow. Yeah, it's hard to believe we've done 33 releases. It was, what was it, 43 months? So we're doing about, a release every month and a half or so. That's our goal. We don't want to have too much release fatigue that people feel like they're constantly having to upgrade. But we feel like we're at a pretty good pace. If you disagree, please let us know if you'd like to see more or less releases. I know a lot of people complain when you're doing monthly releases that it's just too much to keep up with constantly having to upgrade. And so love to hear feedback. So one of the biggest changes was V4 is roles. So we made it so all of our permissions and sharing is now roles based. And there's 2 very special roles. There's super admin and users admin. Users admin can add, delete, assign roles to users now. And super admin is a person that can do anything. One of the special things that super admin can do is it can assign admin roles about each tool. Whoops, I went in the wrong order. So each tool, so we now have 4 tools, has 2 roles associated with it. It has a user role and an admin role. User role is someone who can use that tool. So there's an Arkime user, there's a context user, a Wise user. And then an admin role, such as Wise admin, Arkime admin, are folks that can administrate that tool, and they have extra abilities. Super admin is the only role that can assign the admin roles to other users. That was a recent change. Before that, there's a little bit of confusion about who can do what kind of operation, but now it's very clear that only super admins can do that. We're going to be adding more and more features to the roles system. We're going to keep improving it, but this is the direction we're heading, and we're kind of iterating that way. Another big change is now all indices start with Arkime underscore by default. Previously, there was no default. You could set it, but people didn't always set it. And what we were finding is other tools, not mentioning names, were coming in and messing around with the Arkime indices and screwing things up. So now that all the indices start with Arkime underscore, it's easy for those tools to stay away from our indices, and it's easy for folks to know which are ours versus theirs. You can still do multi-tenancy if you want. You can set the prefix to whatever you want. So if you don't like the Arkime underscore, you can easily override it, but it's now the default, and that's what we use. So now we're going to talk about capture and the biggest changes that came along with capture. So one of the things was in the 2019 MoLaCon, a person did a presentation about monitoring the control plane of routers and switches. And they were like, it's not easy to look at all these protocols that aren't IP or TCP UDP based, which Moloch was really heavily focused on. And so he challenged us to do this. And so we said, okay, that's pretty cool. So now you can write protocols at any layer. So you can write Ethernet parsers, you can write IP level parsers besides just the TCP UDP IP protocols, whatever you want. And so some examples, we have ARP, ISIS, LLDP, a bunch of router protocols that you may or may not know are all now part of Arkime. And we've moved the TCP UDP parsers out of the core to be just parsers that live in the parsers directory also. So they're not special anymore. And one of the cool things that was contributed, excuse me, is we can now detect and store the outer layers of protocols. So if you have some kind of encapsulation, like let's say a GRE encapsulation, we now keep track of both the outer layer and the inner layer. So this screenshot here where it says outer layer is maybe your GRE tunnel's IP address. And then below that, your normal source and destination is what's inside that tunnel. And so this is especially useful in the cloud world where you have lots of tunnels going on. So that was a really cool contribution. And because of this, layering is standard now. So that means if you're dealing with encapsulating protocols and you need to pop out and do a lower level protocol again, you can just make a call and it's very standardized and it will redetect, reclassify what protocol it's seeing. So as a parser writer, it's much easier to write parsers and you can write them at Ethernet, IP, TCP levels. It's up to you. Compression. So this should have been one of the questions, like when was Andy wrong? I was wrong about compression. It's a really cool feature. I shouldn't have resisted it for a number of years. We've seen folks use it and get anywhere between 5 and 25% savings. In my own testing, it's easy to get over 10%, if not more. And so that becomes to real savings when you're writing the PCAP to the disk. In 4.0, we turned it on by default with gzip. We're going to switch to Z standard, I think, in 5.0, because Z standard is lower CPU usage. And you can actually tune it higher and get better compression for the same gzip CPU usage. And the way compression works is it's writing seekable blocks to disk. You can fool with how big you want those seekable blocks to be. We've been going through a couple different defaults. We're still trying to find what the right default should be because it's a performance versus compression versus read time issue. The main issue with how big the block size is when you want to read back the PCAP, that's how much data you have to read each time. You have to read the whole block. And so that's why smaller blocks might not give you as good as compression, but they make reads a lot faster. Now, most folks, reads aren't the most important thing. It's writes that are the most important thing because operators are only looking at some PCAPs, not all of them. But we're still doing some studies about that. And you can easily see your compression ratio on the Files tab by turning on the C ratio column. It's a terrible name, I know, but if I had called it compression ratio, it would have made the column really wide, and I was feeling lazy. So it's called C ratio. Maybe we should have column aliases or something so you could
Oh, I like that.
know what it is. And so this is just a screenshot of what I was seeing on one of my test clusters, around 14, anywhere from 8 to 14%. The other thing we've done is added the ability to write shorter packet headers. You may not know this, but inside of PCAP files, there's a header in front of every single packet. And by default, that header is 16 bytes. Turns out about 10 of those bytes are useless and not used. And we can get rid of them. And we can turn that on before we do any kind of compression. So this is savings before you compress what's being written. It's a very cool feature. We don't have it on by default, though. I don't know if we should or not. Basically, because we've always claimed that we write standard PCAP, and by having this on by default, we can no longer say we write standard PCAP, because this would no longer be a standard PCAP. It would be one that we've modified. We're thinking about turning it on for encryption, since encryption isn't real PCAP anyway. But love to have some feedback if you have ideas about this. Another thing that's not on here is we changed our extensions. So when we write PCAP to disk, it now has a usable extension. It'll say like pcap.gz, it'll say pcap z standard, or it'll say .arkime if it's a non-standard PCAP file. So you'll now know just by looking at the files. Another thing that we've done is really improved our S3 support. We've been doing S3 since almost the very beginning. We've had lots of contributions from the community. I don't know if anybody's here who did contribute to that, but community members added gzip support. They added all kinds of authentication support, and it's been really great. We lately added Z standard supports to compression, and we switched to file per packet thread so that you can actually support writing high volume to S3. Previously, you would have to it would only use one file for all of capture. So if you're doing a large amount of writes, it wouldn't be able to keep up. Done a lot with performance on capture because times are tight for many people. Biggest thing we did is I rewrote AF packet. If you don't know, AF packet is the best way to acquire packets. It's much better than PF ring. It's much easier than PF ring, and it just works. The problem was the first version I did just was wrong. I did a terrible implementation. I think I don't know if it was you that found the bug. Someone found the bug that sometimes on the high volume network, it was just slow and the packets were out of order. So rewrote it. It uses a lot less CPU, 25% or more. It's very powerful. And then we added packet deduplication. It's not enabled by default, but it's simple to enable. Basically, we just look at the packets, look for duplicates, and drop them. This saves you both CPU, because the packets won't have to be processed, and less packets to write out to PCAP files. A couple other minor things. HTTP 2, 3, GQuick support, all been improved. HTTP 3 has excellent SNI detection. If you don't know, HTTP 3 has the most obfuscated protocol ever to hide the SNI. It's just crazy. Someone was on drugs, but we now can do it. So it's great. Talk a little bit about what we've done on the JavaScript side on Viewer. The biggest thing that we've done is refactored our authentication and moved it all into one place. So all of our tools now share the same code for doing authentication. We fully embraced the passport.js method for doing authentication. Previously, it was a hack around how it did it. I didn't fully understand what it was doing it because I used to write JavaScript like a C programmer. Now I write JavaScript as maybe a C++ programmer. I don't know. I'm getting better. But I think I understand it now. And the biggest thing, and the reason this is so important, is we can now support other authentication methods that passport.js supports. And the first one we've done is OIDC. So if you don't know what OIDC is, Taylor's going to talk about it later, but it's awesome. And it's another way to authenticate into all of our tools. We've also added the ability to control what IP addresses are allowed to authenticate, since you now can use Arkime without a reverse proxy with fancier authentication systems like OIDC. and that's just controlled by a user auth IP setting. We've also introduced another little tool called ES-Proxy. ES-Proxy has two features to it. It's both a security proxy and a team proxy. What I mean by a security proxy is it can be used with sensors that are sitting on computers that may not be in the most trusted locations. Data from those sensors to OpenSearch go through the proxy, and the proxy validates what kind of calls the sensor is making and makes sure that only calls that that sensor should be allowed to do are being made, or only data that should be sent up is happening. So this means if someone was able to log into that box and kind of snoop what's going on, even though they could access OpenSearch and start doing things, the things they could do would be limited to what the sensor could do anyway. And so it's greatly reducing the footprint that a bad actor could have. The other thing it can do is it's just a simple team proxy. And this is when you have the desire to move your Elasticsearch to another instance. So it will write the data to both OpenSearches or Elasticsearches or whatever you have, so that you have two writes. And then you can shut down the old cluster and start using the new cluster. And I want to write up a blog post about how to actually do this at some point. We were using it for a couple months, and it was great. High-level viewer stuff we've also done is we've automated how CyberChef is added. So every time there's a new version, it's easy to update. But we refactored everything, lots of stats, and then Elise will be talking about the sharing. And the biggest thing is we upgraded to Node.js v16. We are not using v18 yet because it's not supported by Red Hat 7. And Red Hat 7 still has another year, I think, before it's sunset. There's this debate in the Node.js community about whether they should backport support to v18. There's this one person who's like adamant against it, and then another person who has done a patch. I don't know who will win. We really would like to go to v18, but we haven't yet.
And now I'm going to do a demo. Everyone loves demos, right? All right. As Andy said, it's been a while since our last conference, and we've had 2 major version changes and a name change. So the UI looks different, and we've added a lot of features. One thing that you might not notice, but that's very important, is a speed improvement on the initial load time of the application. So I've done this in two different ways. First, I've combined many of the initial requests into one. There's one endpoint that fetches a lot of the data that populates the UI. I do this because browsers have a max number of parallel connections they can make to certain domains. And so in order to issue the sessions query as quickly as possible, which is the most important query for this page, I needed to reduce all those requests into as few as possible. Now we just make a few requests, and the sessions query is one of the first ones to go. So I've decreased the speed, or increased the speed of the load of this page by about 20% just doing that. In addition to that, I've also decided to lazy load libraries. So as you can see, you don't see the visualization data at the top here. You don't see the map or the timeline graph. Those are off by default now. I'll talk about that in a second. And so we don't need those libraries. We don't need the data visualization libraries, which are very large, and they increase the bundle size of the entire application. So I lazy load those only when a user requests that information. So that helped in also decreasing this load time of the initial application request. I was able to do that because of this new feature. Now, by default, any cluster or any time range greater than or equal to 30 days, we don't show the timeline map or graph. This is an expensive aggregation query to Elasticsearch. So we want to kick that can down the road if we can. So you can override this particular setting in the config. It's called turn off graph days. By default, it's 30 days. You can increase or decrease that as you see fit based on your user's preferences. And you can always override it. If you go to this little box here, it's a drop-down where you can fetch the visualization just once, fetch it for your entire browser session as long as you have this tab open, or override it entirely and just always fetch the data visualizations. You can also hide the graph map entirely and never see it at all. You'll just come back to here if you want to show that at any time. Again, this just speeds up large queries. It's not as important for your like 1 hour queries, but if you're searching for 30 days, you're gonna wanna turn this off. It's gonna speed you up, and you're only gonna wanna look at this data if you really need it. So I'm gonna go ahead and fetch that data. It's really quick because I have my test data. We've only got 338 sessions in this data set. We can also pin the graph map in column headers. I resisted this feature for a while. Kind of embarrassing looking at the GitHub issue saying, oh, that's a silly feature. I think that's silly, but I was wrong. Andy admits he was wrong. I admit I was wrong sometimes too. And this allows you to pin everything above the table values and just see. So you can basically always see the column headers, which is really important, especially if you're not familiar and you want to make sure you understand what you're seeing. And you can view this regardless of whether you have the graph and map as well. So I would also like to talk about another feature that we've implemented thanks to an external contribution for multi-viewer. Multi-viewer is a way to search across multiple clusters. So this is a multi-viewer with 2 different clusters. So if you were to issue a search in version 2 of Arkimeet, this is going to search through all your clusters no matter what. Now there's this little drop-down menu, and you can select which clusters you want to search across. This is awesome because you can provide your analysts a single multi-viewer. They don't have to go to all the different viewers to search for sessions. They can just come to multi-viewer, select the clusters they want to search against, and issue the searches here. Again, this was an external contribution. I only did a pull request review, so it's awesome to get contributions like this from the community. We've also implemented a lot of features in search. So we've implemented AND arrays. Previously, we only had OR arrays. So if you were to search for something like this, this says either your source or destination IP is 10.0.0.1 or 10.0.0.2. Now we can invert these brackets. It's kind of silly looking, but now this is an AND array. This means and 10.0.0.1 and 2. So previously, in previous versions, you'd have to write a query that looked like this for the same thing. So this query, I mean, I guess you can read it and understand it, but it's cumbersome, it's harder to implement, and it's not easy to read. So we think AND arrays can really help with analysts to find the data that they need. We've also implemented a new feature that we call field actions. This is very similar to value actions. And we previously called that right clicks in, I think, version 1 of Arkime. So value actions are the ability to configure links from the values of your session fields, and Arkime will populate those placeholders that you provide in the links with this Arkime state. So this is going to pop open a virus total tab, and it's going to fill out the placeholder values, for instance, the IP, so that you're searching virus total for this particular IP. We've done a very similar thing with field labels as well. You can configure these in the config, just like value actions, and you can provide links to external resources or internal resources, and you provide the URL with placeholder values, and Arkime opens up a new tab and fills in all those placeholder values with the Arkime state. This was another feature that someone requested that we had no idea we needed, and the community said they wanted, and we implemented. So please tell us what you need, and we will implement it. Because we don't know. I'm not an analyst. I don't use Arkime every day for my job. So it's good to have that external contribution and knowledge. Those are the main changes to the sessions page. There's more, but we don't have time for them today. I'm going to go to the spy graph page next. If you're not familiar, the spy graph page shows a temporal view of unique values. So I've only got one node. Let's make this more. So this is basically saying 10.0.0.1 is our top talker on the network. So this can show you a visualization of the unique values in your data set. Data is displayed based upon count of observances over this time period. So I'm searching through all of my data. So we've had 49 sessions with this IP. I've implemented several new data visualizations. This was something I think we talked about in our 2019 MoloCon. This was something that we wanted to do because sometimes it's hard to understand your data if you're just looking at a list of sessions. So we implemented a donut graph, and you can layer this donut graph. Similar to the export intersection endpoint, if you've ever used that, it's basically an aggregation of multiple unique fields, not just one unique field. So you can layer these. And what this is saying is 10.0.0.1, reach out to these URIs. You can hover over to see the counts and pivot. You can layer these as deep as you want, but I think about 3 deep is as much as I can understand. And then we've also implemented the same data, but a few different ways to view it, which is in a table, as well as a tree map. So whatever makes your brain tick, however you can understand this, use it how you see fit, and let us know if there's more visualizations we should add, or if these are not helpful to you, please let us know. I just think looking at a list of sessions is not always telling the whole story, so coming to this page and seeing it in a different view can be really helpful. Andy mentioned it, but I'm going to go into a little more detail on our new roles. So we spent a lot of time on this one, and by we, I mean Andy. He spent most of the time. I was out on maternity leave when you implemented this, I believe. So this is to improve on our previous access and permissions model, as well as to provide finer-grained access to Arkime resources like views, shortcuts, and periodic queries. This is all managed on the users page, so roles and users, you'll come to this page to change them and add them. And we have 2 specific classes of roles. We have user-defined roles, which are identified with this little icon. And then there are system-defined roles that Arkime comes with. I'm going to kind of go into a little bit of detail on the system-defined roles. As Arkime said, we have for each tool 2 different roles. We have an admin role and a user's role. So for instance, Arkime user can simply use the Arkime application. An Arkime admin can use the Arkime application because they inherit Arkime user, but they can also change configuration and view data from all Arkime users. The same with context admin, context user, and WISE. Parliament is kind of an outlier, and I'll talk more about that in our Parliament demo. So this one is super admin, so I can do anything I want. I inherit all roles. Here's how you would create a role. You give it a unique ID and name. You can apply a forced expression to this role. So this is going to augment that. Any user who inherits this role is going to have this forced expression run outside of their view whenever they search Arkime. So maybe you want to restrict them to a single node, for instance. You can also restrict them to a specific query time limit. Maybe they keep bringing your clusters down because they're searching for everything and making some silly queries. You can say, I only want these particular users who inherit this role 1 week. That's the biggest time range that they can search. And then roles inherit other roles. So you could create, for instance, a SecOps role that I created here, and maybe you want to give them access to Arkime and context. So you would select they're an Arkime user and a context user. And there's also role assigners. These are users who can assign this role to other users. And then you can enable or disable the role at any time as well here. We really hope this improves on our old permission model. And I think it provides some nice finer grained access to our Arkime resources, which I'll go over next. Well, not quite next, because I have the most important feature next, which is new themes. We have 2 new themes. I believe we released these in Arkime version 3 with the name change. We have an Arkime Light theme and an Arkime Dark theme. These are automatically set based on your operating system theme. So if you have a dark operating system theme, it selects dark. If you have a light operating system theme, it selects light. And then you can override it at any time on this page. We also have a bunch of different logos. So you can select new logos, and that's what appears in the top left up here. And as always, I didn't remove it. You can make your UI completely unusable by doing your own custom theme. Yeah. It starts with the base of your current theme, and then you can just go crazy. Make everything black, make everything red. I know people like this feature. It's a fun one, but you can really go crazy with it. So back to kind of our sharing talk. We've implemented some changes to views, specifically sharing them. Previously, before version 4, there was just a little checkbox to the left of a view, and you could share it with anyone who had access to that cluster. So now you can share with specific roles as well as sharing with specific users. This is backwards compatible, so anything you shared previously with the sharing checkbox is going to share with the Arkime user role going forward. So it doesn't break anything if you've previously shared these resources. It just adds, that finer grained access control. We've done a similar thing with shortcuts. You can share your shortcuts with specific roles and specific users. And then we've also implemented some new changes to shortcuts. Now you can change the entire shortcut. Previously, you could only change the shortcut name. Now you can change the shortcut value and type. And you can also add a shortcut description. I think this is a really important feature because if you're sharing with a lot of different users, they might want to know what this shortcut is for rather than reading all the values and interpreting it themselves. We have also implemented the ability to search differently with shortcuts. So previously, if you wanted to search using a shortcut, you'd have to do IP equals $, and then you could only search one shortcut. The community said, that's not good enough. We need more. And it was a tough one. I think I started this feature and then I bowed out because Andy was like, I got it. I can figure this out. So we implemented the ability to use wildcards for shortcuts. So this is basically saying the IP is equal to any of the IPs in my shortcuts that start with this string, which is important IPs 1, important IPs 2. So I'm searching for any IPs from 10.0.0.1 all the way to 10.0.0.8 with this query. You can do this query a little bit differently as well with an array. Shortcuts also work in arrays now. This is the same query, just different. Another thing we've changed is, does the AND array?
Yeah.
Yes, the question was, does the AND array work in that with the shortcuts? And yes, it does. You might want to give it a test, make sure, let us know. Yeah.
Is it possible to
We have a way to programmatically define them. What's the
Yeah,
script?
the DBPL script, I think, will allow you to
Yes.
upload shortcuts.
Yeah, so you basically provided a text file
And you can
with your
actually,
shortcuts.
you can lock them so that a person can't edit them. So
Yep.
you can export them from Splunk, for example, and re-upload them here and just keep them in sync with the cron job.
We've also implemented a bunch of changes to cron queries. We're now calling them periodic queries. Forgive me, I still call them cron queries. It's a hard transition to make. Periodic queries can perform actions on sessions that match the expression provided. So this particular one is searching for all TLS sessions and tagging them with a TLS tag. You can also tag and then export them to other clusters. We've added the same sharing paradigm to this as well. So you can share with roles and you can share with specific users. And this is why we've also added a description field. So you can describe your periodic queries. So if you're sharing them with other users, they understand what you're searching for and what's being tagged and why. We've added more data, who it's created by, when it was created, when it was last run, and as well as when it was last enabled or disabled. So lots more data there. Lastly, we've added a button that opens the matching sessions. So this just opens up a new sessions tab, and it's going to search for the tags TLS on sessions. Just a quicker way to get to your periodic query results. And then finally, some hunt improvements. Hunt is a feature that we implemented to search through the packets for text. So this is not like searching your sessions, which is searching the metadata, tag metadata from your sessions. This is searching the packets themselves. This has been improved quite a bit, mostly in bug fixes, but we've also implemented some new features as well. So I'm going to create a new packet search job, and this is going to search whatever my current query is in the search bar. So I'm searching all of my sessions. You don't want to do this in the real world. It would be very bad. And you would get a little warning up here saying, stop, don't do that. And you can also configure where the threshold is, how many sessions you can search with this hunt job in the config. More information on our website on the settings page. So I'm going to search for some coconuts. I'm going to search through all my packets. And we've added a description here. This is so when you share this to other users, they know why you're searching for this in the packets. I'm going to search for some coconut text. I can share it with whoever I want. I'm going to share it with all Arkime users in that SecOps role. You can do specific users here. And then it's going to queue it up. So it starts in the queue. It's going to run. You can pause and stop it at any time. It was really quick because we only searched through 338 sessions. When it's done, it goes into the history. And you can open it up here and view some more information about this hunt. One of the big things that we've done is handling hunt errors better. We were getting a lot of issues where hunts were getting stalled and a user would have to reinitialize the hunt over and over when Arkime couldn't reach specific nodes. Like if you had a node down, and your hunt tried to reach out to a session that was on a node that was down, it was just going to stop and it wasn't going to continue. Now we have some fail safes that say, okay, that node's down. We're going to stop searching that node. We're going to show an error and we're going to keep going and search the other nodes. And And this was a big change because people were having to come back here and click the rerun button, trying to bring up the node and figure it all out. So you'll get an error at the bottom, and it's going to tell you which sessions it couldn't, it was going to tell you which node and how many sessions it couldn't search. And so it's still going to do as much as it can, but it might not fully complete until you have all your nodes up. We've also, yeah, go on. Yeah. I believe so, yes. Yeah. Yeah, Chris.
Where does the search?
Your question is, where does the search run? The search runs on whichever cluster you have configured with cron query set to true.
But it's reaching out to each viewer that has the PCAP. Maybe
Yeah.
is what you're asking. In a cloud setting, it would be the central viewers running it.
How does it do S3? Andy?
Yeah, so in an S3 setup, it'd be your whatever central viewer you have that knows how to talk to S3 would be doing it. The question was, does it pull the files? The answer is yes, it pulls the files. It pulls pieces of the file. It uses a range, HTTP range.
Next, we've implemented a feature to remove this data from the sessions that it matches. So for every session that the hunt job matches, it adds a hunt ID field and a hunt name field. So maybe you searched for something and you fat fingered something, or your search didn't come up with what you wanted and it tagged bad sessions. You might want to remove those fields from those sessions. It's kind of a cleanup feature. And then at any time you can delete the hunt as well. You can delete it when it's running and it will stop running, or you can delete it from your history. So that's the main overview of all our new features from version 3 and version 4 from our last conference. This is not all the features. There's many more, but this is all we had time for today. We've placed a lot of emphasis on user-friendly design and documentation. So please read our documentation that Andy talked about earlier. We're excited for you to try out these features and give us feedback. Please, please, we want GitHub issues. Talk to us on Slack. We really, really appreciate your feedback. We're just developers. We don't use the tool every day. We need other people to understand that we don't understand everything. So, and again, this is not the end. We have a lot of fixes and features for version 5. Andy will talk more about that later. Thank you so much, and back to Andy. No. Right. Questions for Andy and I about Arkime features? No? Okay. Okay, go, shoot.
No, Arkimeet can both read and write from S3. The file, maybe the question really is, if you have PCAP already in S3, can we read it? The answer is currently no. We only can read what we place into S3. But it's something we do want to do.
Shane?
Yeah, I have the talking stick. I'm trying to, there we go.
There
Hey,
you go.
if whenever you guys do this thing, just let me know. I'm going to pass it around.
Try this one.
We can repeat the question.
Yeah, all right. Both alive. So my question is, when we're doing that compression for our PCAP, and we're getting around 10%, you said?
Yeah.
So ideally, would that present a latency issue? Like when I'm expanding like a session or something, to decompress it, would it show any like latency? That's what I'm asking here.
Potentially a tiny bit. Like if your environment is maybe a research environment where you're running tons of hunts and tons of other things going on, maybe if you are kind of the classic SOC environment, no, you won't notice at all.
Perfect. Thank you.
And Chris?
Yeah, circling back to circling back. Process of reading that. Maybe it has to. So process.
That's entirely up to you about how you set up your S3. Basically, capture needs to be able to write, a viewer needs to be able to read. If they're on the same machine and using this same account or whatever, then yes, they'd be the same. If you use two different accounts, it could be 1 and 1.
Any other questions? All right, you're off the hook, Andy.
Nice.
All right. What of the following is not a private IP? I got this one wrong. I'll admit it. Oh, takes a while. Hold on. I'll let everyone get ready. Then we'll do it. You can click it again. All right. Ready, set, go.
know this one because I'm not telling you, but I'm just saying we had some architects for our IP ranges that were not kosher. There was one that was outside of scope, and then there was one that was actually the documentation that they sent you originally, which was 134177. Yeah, imagine having that in your private IP system.
Oh, you all got it right. I got it wrong. I'm
Good
not a network guru.
Most of these IPs, or many of these IPs, used to be owned by AOL. So AOL folks should know the answer to this. Yeah.
All right. Now to Parliament. I don't know if anyone uses Parliament. Raise your hand if you use Parliament. One? That makes me so very sad. Oh, I implemented this a while ago. It's basically an Arkimeet cluster dashboard. It's a landing page for all of your Arkimeet clusters. It also provides links to your health, or links to the clusters, and then shows the cluster health. And you can also see statistics about your cluster and view issues, as well as get alerts via email, Slack, or Twilio about issues in any of your clusters you have configured on Parliament. So let's jump into a demo so I can hopefully convince you all to use it because it's awesome. Right, Andy? Okay. So here's the landing page. As I mentioned earlier, Parliament is a little bit different in terms of roles. Any Arkime user can view Parliament in dashboard mode. A Parliament user can interact with these issues, and a Parliament admin can configure your Parliament. So adding the groups, adding the clusters, and configuring all the data here. This includes some links to your cluster. This will go to my localhost cluster. There's also a link directly to the stats page for that cluster. And then you have your cluster health here. These are statistics about this cluster. This is just my localhost cluster. It's not capturing anything. It's not very interesting. But you would see all of this data updated every 15 seconds by default, but you can configure that here. So you can configure 4 different types of clusters. You can configure a default cluster, which is going to show you your alerts. It's going to issue alerts if you have them configured. It's going to show you your stats, your health, and links to the cluster as well as your issues. You can configure a silent cluster. This is the same as a regular cluster, but it's not going to issue alerts to any of the notifiers you have configured. And then you can implement a disabled cluster. And this is like for clusters you're bringing up or down, and it doesn't do anything. You don't see stats. We assume that this is kind of like a dead cluster. And then you have your multi-viewer clusters. These don't issue alerts, but you'll see stats, or don't issue alerts or see stats, but you will see health and links to your clusters for your multi-viewer clusters. In order to configure your dashboard, as I said, you must be an admin and you can toggle edit mode here. Let's edit a cluster and see what it comprises. So you can configure what statistics you see here by clicking these checkboxes on or off. Give it a title, and this is going to be what populates the link to the cluster. Give it a description to let all your analysts know what this cluster is all about, what it's capturing. And then the URL you provide is how Parliament reaches out and gets the statistics as well as the cluster health. And then you configure the type, and it's described here in this dropdown.
What's the local URL for?
The local URL is for if you are in a network and you have local URLs, like you're not going out to get the data, you're within your network, and you it will look for the local URL before reaching out to the other URL. So in this case, these are the same because I'm on my local machine reaching out to localhost. These here are issues that this cluster is experiencing. So this one's not checked in, it's not receiving any packets, and it says Elasticsearch is down. You can view all of these here as well as on the issues page. You have to be a Parliament user in order to see all these buttons and interact with these issues. You can acknowledge issues with this little checkbox. Acknowledging issues means, hey, I'm going to work on this. I don't want to get any more alerts, and I want to kind of gray it out so any other people who come here know this isn't a problem, we're working on it. You can delete it at any time when you are done fixing this issue, or it will be removed by default after 10 minutes. Any issues not seen for an hour are going to be automatically removed by default. So if you don't want to interact with these issues, you don't want to come to this page, you don't have to at all. They will just be removed if the last notice time exceeds 1 hour. That is a great idea. The suggestion is to, when you acknowledge the issue, put the user who acknowledged the issue in this table. I like that idea. And then anyone who comes by can say, like, Paul, you acknowledged this issue. Is it done yet? Let's go. Yeah.
Clusters, but tell it to not monitor.
No.
I know it's weird, but hear me out. The idea that you could actually monitor a single cluster, but all the nodes in the cluster.
No, we don't have that. So multi-viewer cluster is kind of the closest we have to that, right? It's not going to show the stats, but it does monitor the health. Yeah, no, we don't have that feature.
Okay.
I think you should write a feature request. You too, or else I'm going to forget. Oh, there you go. You'll remind me at stand-up tomorrow. Oh, we don't have stand-up tomorrow. On Thursday. You can also ignore issues as well. This is not the same as acknowledging. This will ignore for a certain time period, or you can ignore it forever. So you won't get alerts on this issue until the ignore is over. And then you can unignore at any time as well. Again, these will just get removed after 60 minutes if they're not seen, even ignored issues. You can search and filter this page, which is really useful. There's only a few issues in this Parliament, but like our Yahoo Parliament has a lot of issues. And so it's nice to be able to come here and say, like, I don't want to see the ignored or acknowledged issues. These are the only issues that are relevant to me right now that I need to maybe work on. And lastly, the settings page. You can configure when you get these issues here. These options kind of are the thresholds for when you're going to get out-of-date issues, Elasticsearch down issues, or low packets. You can configure them here based upon your use case. You can also configure how long it takes for issues to automatically be removed. It's automatically removed after 60 minutes or an hour, but you can increase or decrease this threshold here. And same with removing acknowledged issues. Maybe it takes you 30 minutes to acknowledge or to fix an acknowledged issue. So you want to bump this up a little bit so you don't keep getting the issues added to your Parliament. As of version 4, we've implemented the auth section for Parliament. Previously, there was one password for Parliament, and you had to share that password with any user who you wanted to interact with Parliament. Now we're using the Arkime users database. So the password section has been deprecated. Please don't use that going forward. There's a little warning box there telling you not to do that anymore. So use this auth section to allow access to your Parliament for any user who has a Parliament user or an Arkime user, so anyone can see it in dashboard mode, and people who are going to be working on your Parliament, give them the Parliament user role. And lastly, I keep talking about alerts, right? So any issues you receive on your cluster can be alerted via email, Twilio, or Slack. And you can configure those here. So I've just configured a Slack notifier. This notifies me directly. You can turn it on or off here, and you can determine which particular issues you're going to alert the Slack endpoint with. So this is really powerful. You don't have to come to your Parliament to understand what's going on. You can get your alerts via email, Twilio, or Slack. Yes. Mm-hmm. No. So email, yes, but all the others, no. And it would be great to open a GitHub issue, and I can work on it. Oh, yes, or better, a pull request. Thank you. I need to keep doing that. Not just a GitHub issue. We love pull requests as well. All right, and that is it for the Parliament demo. I hope this convinces you to use it. It's very powerful, and I would love to have some feedback for this, just like we're hearing here. I know there are things I've missed, things that people want that we don't have, bugs. I'm sure they exist. They always do. So please use this and let me know. All right.
So real quick about WISE, we're not going to do a whole WISE talk this year. There's some on the website, and if people have questions, maybe we'll do one during the fire talk. But basically, WISE is a way to integrate intelligence feeds into Capture so that as we're writing sessions to OpenSearch, we can look at either commercial or private sources and augment or enhance your data. We rewrote all of WISE, and we added a UI, and I'm going to do a quick demo of the UI. Done. There is now a UI. We show the stats, types. You can sort your stats so you can see which things folks are using. You can actually query, just like I'm going to forget my example. Oh, yes. You can query. It will show the same results that would have shown up in your session data. And the biggest change is you can now do your configuration and the editing of the configuration and the files themselves right from the UI. This configuration can be shared across multiple WISE servers. You can store the configuration in Redis, Elasticsearch, a bunch of different places. Same with the files themselves. The files can now live in Redis, Elasticsearch, or on disk. And you can actually go in and edit the files, and you can change the file and hit save, and it will automatically push it out now to all of the different instances. You could add new sources of data with just this create. I'm not going to go into it. And then you can also see we have some URL ones. These you can't edit, but you can at least display them. So, one of the things that was configured here is to go fetch all the AWS IPs and tag all of our data with AWS IPs. You can actually go in here and see them. That's a real quick demo. How do I get back? Computers are hard.
hit it.
Oh. Want to talk real quick about testing and verification. We have 3 test suites that run on every single commit. We have an API test suite. That's basically going against viewer, Parliament, context, all of them to make sure the API passes. We have UI test suites. And then we have a PCAP test suite. The PCAP test suite is running capture against about 150 different PCAP files that we have checked into our repository. We use sanitized builds of capture to make sure there's no memory leaks or other kinds of access out of bounds. We do fuzzing with the built-in fuzzer to Clang these days. We're currently not integrated with any of the systems out there that are running it continuously, but we're hoping either this year or next year to do that. We do some bug bounty stuff that I'm going to talk about in just a second. We do CPP check for our capture and ESLint for all of our JavaScript code. ESLint also runs on every single commit. And we're recently getting into the GitHub code scanning. So those 3 test suites I mentioned before, we don't have any failing tests. We don't have any flaky tests. They have to pass every single time. The GitHub code scanning is new for us. It used to be LGTM. They bought it a couple years ago, I think, and moved it over. We still have a couple tests that are flaky that we're trying to fix and figure out exactly how we want to support it. But eventually, we will have GitHub's code scanning as always having to be passed before we merge anything. Next thing I want to talk about is bug bounty. Sean left. If you see Sean later, he is always involved. He runs the bug bounty program at Yahoo. Definitely say hi to him. We've been using HackerOne and Integrity. I should stop saying we. Yahoo uses HackerOne and Integrity. And just really, we're really, really lucky with Arkimeet that Yahoo is still sponsoring a bug bounty program and is still paying out money for Arkimeet. It's been involved in 2 live hacking events. If you ever have the chance to go to a live hacking event, I definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun. I've been to one of them, the one in Los Angeles, unfortunately. Adam went to the one in Antwerp, lucky. And you get to hang out with, ethical hackers. They will still try and hack you personally too, so you still have to be careful. But they're finding all kinds of cool things. We've paid over $90,000. Yahoo has paid over $90,000 for. Thank you. Has paid over $90,000 for just Arkimeet bugs, and I want to say Yahoo's paid millions of dollars for just bugs in general that the ethical hackers have found. So it's a pretty big program. I'm sure. Yes. I'm sure Sean can give you the exact number of how much they've paid out. It's probably like memorized. Oh my gosh. But it's really cool stuff. Please get involved in bug bounty if you're allowed to. Some companies don't allow you to, so make sure you check. Some findings we've had. Unfortunately, this last time they found a way to bypass the security part of ES-Proxy. I was very sad, but I feel a lot better about ES-Proxy now because they actually attacked it and tried to find issues with it. There's some sanitization issues, log escaping. It turns out if you as an admin are tailing a file and people are logging and you are logging things with control characters in it, it is possible to copy things in your paste buffer. And then if you paste it accidentally, it can actually have a return in it and run a command. And so it's a bunch of things that have to happen. And maybe it's silly, but it's still kind of cool that they were able to do this with Arkime, get people to run commands. And then we had some issues with capture itself around DNS. They managed to get infinite recursion, which is bad. And then we had some hash table collisions that we've now fixed with, we're doing random seeds of our hash tables. So yeah, bug bounty is awesome. Context we're going to talk about later. It's a new piece of the Arkimeet suite. And here's the last question, I think. So this is your chance to come from behind. Is everybody ready? I'm looking at you. See, he asked this earlier, and I thought he cheated and hacked the Slido. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah, I didn't give you the answer. I'll tell you in 5 seconds. Wow, 43%. Nice. Purple. Good job. Okay, Kevin. Kevin won. Who's Kevin? I'm sorry. Is Kevin not here? Oh my goodness, Kevin's not here. Is Kevin not here? Good try. Who's second place?
He's remote.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Kevin.
Sorry, Kevin. Paul got second place. There you go, Paul. Kevin, we greatly appreciate you. 5 for 5, awesome. So just wrapping up, how you can help submit things, be awesome. Talk on Slack. We really like when people participate with Slack, so please do that. Office hours, I would love to get feedback about office hours. So far, our office hours are not highly utilized. Love to understand why. Taylor's always there, Paul's there sometimes, Adam, occasionally. Like, we're there to help. We want to answer questions and help you, and people aren't there, and I'm like, I'm sad. So if you have ideas, like if we should change the time, if we need to have topics, whatever.
I know. You need to be less responsive on Slack.
Yes, I will stop answering questions on Slack and make you come to office
I have
hours.
stories about the first time I tried to set up Moloch and my interactions with Andy, if you ever want to hear about it.
Cool. Real question on questions. Will there be cake? There is some cake today. FedRAMP, no, sorry. If someone wants to figure out how to do that, that would be awesome.
Pull request.
It's probably more than a pull request, I'm guessing. but
Yeah.
Who knows? Awesome. Cool. Well, that's the keynote. I suggest, since we're running late, we do bio break.